Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and tonight I just got back from watching the first Omen, which is a brand new horror movie, which is prequel, supposedly, to the 1976 original The Omen film. And I say supposedly, and we'll get into that. We're going to talk about that, because I do not think that this movie actually is what it's being advertised to be. But, like I said, we'll get to that all in a minute. So first, I want to say that this is a really solid horror movie. They did a really good job. It would have been so easy for them to just phone this in, just ride the coattails of an old franchise that a lot of people still, kind of have love for, and just be like, oh look, it has The Omen in the title, so we can kind of just bullshit our way through this and not really care, not really try anything new, and just kind of put a bunch of jump scares and a bunch of references, and there you go. That's it. It would have been so easy, and they didn't do that. You can tell that they really cared, they really tried. They did a lot of atmospheric horror, and yes, they do obviously have a bunch of callbacks and references to the Omen movie that everyone knows, right? So, I gotta congratulate them on that, right? There's also a lot of just crazy imagery that I think is gonna become like instant classics in like horror movie circles, right? Like people who are really big fans of horror movies, there's a couple images in here I can think of one especially that like you're not gonna forget that anytime soon. Like you're gonna walk away and be like, remember when that happened though? Because that was wild. So it's kind of like Hereditary in that sense, where like you walk away with certain images in your brain and you're like, that's not leaving my brain for a minute because I've never seen that happen before. Okay, wow. Anyways, but yeah, just overall really solid. You really care about the characters, and it builds on the mythology of the Omen in an interesting way. And here's where I kind of have to go into spoiler territory. I have to talk about what this movie's being marketed as and what I think it really is. So we'll just leave the review part of it there. It was really solid, it was really good, it's atmospheric, not a lot of jump scares. It has a couple, but it definitely it hits the vibe of that original The Omen film, right? Like it definitely feels like it's part of the same universe. But now we gotta talk about the spoilers, okay? So spoiler section, but also why I don't think this is actually a prequel to the 76 movie section. Here we go. You ready? Okay, here we go. There are a lot of inconsistencies if you want to say that this movie is supposed to be an actual prequel to the 1976 movie. Okay, and when I say a lot, I don't just mean like, oh, I have some questions about like how certain things happened because this raised new questions. I don't mean that. I mean like there are things that they seem to have fundamentally changed that just don't make any sense now if you're trying to say this actually is a prequel to that movie. And this is coming from a Star Wars fan, right? Like, the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, they opened up so many cans of worms of things that don't make any sense, and we had to like do all these like acrobatic like jumps through logic trying to like make sense of a bunch of stuff in the Star Wars prequels, and we kind of had to reckon with that for over 20 years. Now we've done the work and we've accepted all the changes, and it is what it is. This movie, there are just fundamental things that are not the same, and you can't, I think tone wise you could watch this movie and then watch the original Omen and be like, okay, I can kind of see how this all fits together. But when you really break it down, there's things that just don't work. Okay, so first thing is the character of Father Brennan. He plays a major role in this movie, and he played a pretty major role in the original Omen movie. So the whole thing is that in the original Omen movie, he was supposed to have been, and this is the backstory that they give us, okay, is that he was working with the Satanists to help create the Antichrist, right? He's the one, he helped be responsible for Damien being born, and he even says that he was there when Damien was born and that its mother was a jackal. And that's like a major part of the movie. It's a really famous line from The Omen for over 40 years, 50 years. You know, its mother was a jackal, Mr. Thorne. Its mother, you know, like that's kind of a big deal. It's a big part of his character. And in that same original movie, we find out that, you know, he was dying of cancer, and so he wants to repent for all the bad things he did. They also find the 666 mark on his body, which, you know, is just evidence that he was a member of the satanic cult that was, you know, helping Damien rise to power, right? Like, that's kind of the whole plot of The Omen, you know? Like, all this happened behind the scenes to set this up for this little kid to be part of this family. Like, that was the whole thing. In this movie, Father Brennan is not that guy. He's not a member of the satanic cult. In fact, and again, spoiler alert, there is no satanic cult. There's no Satanist in this movie. This movie basically says that the church itself, the Catholic Church, or the Christian Church, or whatever, they are the ones who are creating the Antichrist purposefully because they feel that so many people are losing faith in the church and they want to bring people back, and the only way to do that is to bring up something so horrible that it's gonna force everyone back. And this is happening, you know, this is during the 70s, right? So like, this is their plan. The church is the one who's creating the Antichrist. They're not Satanists, they're not an evil cult. You know, like this movie says, this is the church that's doing this, you know? So that's one thing. The second thing is that Father Brennan in this movie, he's not a member of them who's helping them do this. In fact, he is actively investigating and trying to stop the people who are doing this. He does not have the mark on him anywhere. That's never a thing. That's not like a thing that's brought up. The other thing, and I think this was like, even going into this movie, I had major questions as to how this was going to be accomplished. The main character of this movie, spoilers, is of course the mother of Damien. And, you know, they do this whole thing where like, you know, her father, you know, they had basically created this beast, you know, this devil beast who is a jackal, and the jackal is a male, and the jackal had, you know, relations with a woman, and now this lady was born. And the idea is that they keep doing that over and over again. I know it's real sick, but they keep doing that over and over again until they eventually get a boy, and that boy will be the Antichrist. So even the famous line from Brennan, like, its mother was a jackal, even that was not true, you know? And in the original movie, he'd have no reason to lie about that, not to Thorne, you know, not to, you know, the father he's trying to convince to stop Damien. Like, so what's up? You know, like, that's my huge thing here, is that like, this is being heavily promoted as a prequel to the first Omen movie, but it's clearly not. And yet at the same time, this movie directly shows images of like the actors from the original movie. Like, they're like, oh, here's Ambassador Thorne, you're gonna have to go try to get them to take the baby, and this is like the whole plan, and that's like setting up the first movie. So this movie both heavily contradicts everything that they say in that first movie, and then also sets that movie up directly. It's like trying to do both things. Honestly, this is a reboot. This is a reboot with a brand new continuity, but they also don't want it to fully be a reboot, so they're showing you like pictures of those original actors, like oh, this is literally that first movie from '76. So I don't know, guys, I don't get it. You know, like, the entirety of Dr. Brennan's character, the entire fact that, hey, his mother was in fact not a jackal, and they even throw in another kind of interesting twist that, you know, as far as I'm aware, has never been brought up in any other Omen property ever. When Damien is born, he also has a twin sister, And so the mother and that sister both managed to escape, and now they're living their lives in a snowy cabin. And Dr. Brennan, or I'm sorry, Father Brennan knew where they were, and he like warns them like, hey, just so you know, their plan is moving ahead, and they've given it a name, Damien, right? So like, and then he's like, oh, and by the way, they know that you're alive, and they're gonna come after you. Which again, that's that this is all new stuff, you know. So like, I'm fine if this is a reboot. I have no problem with that at all, right? Like, and again, this is coming from a Star Wars prequel fan who's like, you know, I acknowledge I have to like bend over backwards to try and make some of this make sense logically, but like, just say that it's a reboot. Maybe the word reboot is too scary for studios, you know. Maybe they're kind of like, audiences don't really like reboots, so we don't want to call it that. But that's what it is, you know what I mean? Like, they're trying to kind of have their cake and eat it too by directly contradicting the movie that they're setting up on purpose, you know. And it's very strange. And I feel like no one else is talking about this. I've seen a lot of reviewers praise the film, and it does deserve all the praise it's getting. It is really good. And so obviously, like, if you're not, you know, a goddamn nerd like me, right? Like, if you don't care about all this continuity nonsense, then watch the movie. It's a really solid horror movie. You'll enjoy yourself. You know, you could even, like I said, you can kind of bend yourself and be like, well, let's just pretend the certain parts of the original movie didn't happen. I guess I just, whatever, who cares, you know, and just go with it, right? That's fine. You know, I'm just saying, like, for me personally, when I start like picking up on these things, I'm like, well, this can't be a prequel to that movie then, because none of that stuff happened. The mother was not a jackal, Mr. Thorne. The mother was a normal lady. In fact, she's still alive. In fact, Damien has a sister out there. I don't know why I would lie about any of this. Very strange. So yeah, guys, I don't know. For me, that's like my only major criticism, and it's less about the movie itself. It's more about like the way they're choosing to market this, because it's definitely not a prequel to that movie. Anyways, I feel like I just had to get that out there. Having said all of that, like I said, it is a really solid horror movie. I had a good time. It's definitely still got the vibes of that classic movie. It's got a lot of iconic imagery that, like, I'm gonna be thinking about for a while. It's definitely worth the watch, especially if you're, you know, a horror fan. If you're a fan of those original movies, definitely worth a watch. You'll probably pick up on some of the stuff I just mentioned because, you know, you'll be like, wait, how does? But there's no. Where's the jackal? Is the dad now? And that, huh? You know, okay. Anyways, but yeah, just this is a really solid one. Hopefully, they can just come out and say this is a reboot. It's a reboot prequel, a pre-boot, and if they do that, that's fine. In fact, they can go ahead and now do their new version of the original Omen story, except this time the mother is still alive and he has a sister out there, and you can kind of go into how that might come into play with, you know, this new version of the original story, because Damien not being the only one out there and the mom still being alive, and, you know, I'm sure she could get involved and try to warn the Thorne family about like what's about to happen, right? So like, there's a lot of interesting directions you could take a potential redoing of that original movie. But right now they're still marketing it as if it's a prequel to that original one, and like as if they don't have plans to, you know, follow this up. But the way they ended this movie, it definitely feels like they want to, you know. It definitely feels like, oh, we're gonna do the original Omen, but it's gonna be entirely different because we changed so many things. So I kind of wish they would just be upfront about that, but I have a feeling this was a studio thing. I feel like the, you know, 20th Century Studios, Disney, whatever, was like, let's steer clear of the word reboot. Let's not say it's a reboot, because people always complain about those. Let's just say it's just a prequel, and then we'll kind of let people discover on their own that, oh, wait a minute, some of this doesn't make sense anymore, you know? Anyways, let me know what you guys thought about the first Omen. What was your favorite moment of this crazy movie, because yeah, a lot of this like gets pretty nuts. And does any of this continuity stuff bother you at all? Like, are you or are you normal? Are you not a nerd and you don't care about all this? For me, I'm like, hold on, let's make a list of all the stuff that it bothers me just a tiny bit. It's not enough to, like, you know, bring the score of the movie down or anything. Like, you know, it's fine, whatever, but I do have to acknowledge that it's there. Anyways, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.